All right, so you probably heard a lot over the last day and a half about high-level disruption, innovation in AI. And today I want to take it down to a very specific level of what are the specific capabilities for financial services, AIs that are live today, what could be live by 2030, and how that will shape the future of our industry. So I'm going to show you a lot of screenshots, talk about specific items, what's live, what's not, what works, what doesn't work, and really take this from the level of disruption down to very specific AI capabilities. Very briefly about myself, I've been a consultant in Fintech and AI for about 13 years, done a lot of projects with big American banks about how to roll out Gen AI solutions, also a former founder, built and scaled a chatbot company, so been in the AI space for a while. So in terms of our agenda for today, very high level. First, what's the current state of AI in financial services right now? Then we'll talk about what's coming, what will be available by 2030, and talk about what the scenarios are for how that shapes this industry. So let's start with the current state. So this is kind of an optometry test for those in the back, but I'll talk through it. So right now, most big financial services firms offer a very bad rules-based chatbot. I think everyone knows this, but it's worth saying because there's so much hype in the news about why hasn't AI disrupted finance yet? And the reality is, financial services is still on chatbots. So this is Bank of America, one of the most valuable banks in the entire world. This is their consumer-facing chatbot. If you ask it any question that's harder than a very basic customer service email, it fails. So here's two examples. On the left here, it says, I currently have a large amount of euros. I'm thinking about converting it to dollars. How should I approach this? Do I do it now? Wait till year end? It gives a completely incorrect answer because it's just keywording on euros and USD. Over here, you ask, I just got a year-end bonus. Do I put it in my retirement? Do I put it in my bank account? How do I decide? Once again, completely incorrect answer because it's just keywording. It's a simple rules-based chatbot. So even though it's 2024, this is what the average big bank and brokerage firm offers. So as of 2024, there are a few fintech leaders who have actually launched a live Gen AI assistant that looks and feels like ChatGPT, but for the most part, this industry lags behind. So that same question I just showed you a moment ago, I just got a year-end bonus at work. Should I put the money into my retirement account or bank account? ChatGPT handles it easily. So Gen AI, just before we go any farther, this hasn't largely come to financial services yet. So that's the state of play today. What does the leading financial AI assistant of 2030 look like? And I put an asterisk on 2030 because the exact date varies by industry. If you work in self-directed brokerage trading, that space moves very quickly. Gen AI assistants are much more likely to come sooner. If you work in, say, life insurance, that space moves a lot slower. They might be the last ones to actually roll out a Gen AI assistant. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just use 2030 as a date when all financial services firms have a good Gen AI. So we're looking forward to 2030. What are the actual capabilities that Gen AI can do already and will improve upon, and what capabilities can it not do yet? And by the way, the text is a little bit small here, so when I saw on my laptop, it was a little bigger, so apologies for the small text here. But so let's talk through the 4 capabilities Gen AI can already do that are roughly replacing a human role, or at least augmenting it. And then we'll talk about 4 roles that Gen AI can't do yet and may or may not be able to do by 2030. So let's go with the first one. Gen AI can already do budgeting and financial planning. If you watch a financial advisor interact with clients, a lot of what they do is basic budgeting and financial planning. And if you've tried this with Gen AI, it can already do this pretty well. So a screenshot on the upper right here shows someone asking, I currently live in the Netherlands. I'm thinking about retiring to Portugal. How much would that cost? How much would I need? It gives a pretty good detailed response. And this is the state as of 2024. 6 more years of development in this space, it's going to be very, very good at handling budgeting and financial planning questions. So this is sort of going to happen. And so if you think about the typical financial advisor, this means you have to focus on higher value activities. Just doing basic financial planning and putting someone in a model portfolio is not going to add enough value when ChatGPT can already do this. So the next thing in terms of capabilities that it already can do as of 2024, and only can get better in the next 6 years, is account analysis. So if you watch a financial advisor interact with a customer, a lot of what they're doing is looking at their accounts, their history, their spending, their investments, and giving feedback specific to their portfolio. So this screenshot's a Bunk. They're a big neobank here in the Netherlands. They already have a Gen AI assistant live. And so as of today in 2024, Gen AI can do this decently well. It can do basic account analysis. It can't do very advanced analysis yet, but it's getting there. So let me show you an example. This is the Bunk Gen AI. I asked it, hey, can you look at my account? Any recommendations on where I'm spending my money? Too much here, too much there. It does a pretty good analysis of, different categories: rent, subscriptions, groceries, dining out. Here's how much you're spending on each category. You should try to reduce this or that. But if you try to ask it a more detailed question, like, how much did I spend on traveling last year? Do you have any tips on, how much I'm spending on traveling versus people like me, my age, similar income, whatever? It doesn't do it. It basically punts. What you see here is it says, as for comparing you to other users, that's a bit tricky. It varies widely, but hey, you're living it up. So just to make it clear, Gen AI is pretty good at this. It's not fully there yet, but it's getting better with each year. And by 2030, it will definitely be able to do robust automated account analysis. So the next one here is plain English, or whatever language you speak. So if you watch a financial advisor interact with a client, a lot of it is trying to translate informal language, plain English, to financial jargon and vice versa. So if you watch an advisor, the person talking about their goals and their life and their dream, they're not speaking in financial jargon. So what's great about Gen AI is it's getting better at speaking in plain English and translating back and forth between jargon. So this is an example from American English. There's an informal phrase, what happens if I get hit by a bus? That's American English for what happens if I die unexpectedly. And if you ask, what happens if I get hit by a bus to Bank of America, this rules-based chatbot, it has no idea. It says, go to security center. If you ask a Gen AI, it properly recognizes this informal language and what you're trying to ask about without knowing what the term beneficiary is or legal heirs. So this seems minor, but it's super important. A lot of what an advisor does is translate informal language. And so as you get better at this over time, it'll be more and more helpful and more able to replace a human financial advisor. And the final one here is stock trading and research. A lot of my clients, this is their number one concern. How does it handle questions about investing? And so I've tested out a lot of the live Gen AI assistants. This is from public.com, which is a big neo-broker in the States. They've launched a Gen AI assistant. It's called Alpha. And I want to show you what it does and doesn't do right now. So in this example here, it's asking, hey, can you give me a list of low-cost index ETF that give me exposure to American tech stocks? Boom. Answer, different good suggestions, saves you a lot of time. In this example over here, it asked, hey, what do you think of Microsoft stock? How it's been trading since the start of the year? It answers the part about how it's been trading since the start of the year. It does the research for you and tells you what the values are, but it declines to answer whether you should buy Microsoft stock. So right now, as of 2024, Gen AI can already do pretty useful stock research for you and save you time, but it's not doing buy, sell, hold advice. So that transitions us nicely to the next slide. So what capabilities may or may not be ready by 2023. So the first one we just talked about, which is buy, sell, hold, telling you to specifically trade this or specifically sell that. Here's the other three. Second one is product recommendations. So if you watch a financial advisor, oftentimes the person goes, I want to buy a house. Where should I get my mortgage? I don't know. And they'll say, I recommend you use this bank for this reason. Gen AI does not do that yet. It generally does not actually give a definitive recommendation. So that's something it doesn't do. Third one is advanced tax strategies. So, Gen AI can explain how taxes on stocks work, but advanced strategies like, I'm a high net worth individual in the Netherlands thinking about moving to Switzerland for 6 months of the year and setting up a trust for my kids. That level of tax strategy is too much for Gen AI. And the final one here is just what I call painful to undo products. Think about life insurance, trusts. If you make a mistake there, it could cost you a lot of money. And generally, Gen AI does not touch those products yet. So for all these four things it doesn't do today, it may be able to do it by 2030, maybe not. It depends a lot on how liability works and how regulatory environment plays out and whether there's some tech breakthroughs to reduce hallucinations. Because even if it only hallucinates 3% of the time, if you're dealing with advanced tax strategies, that's still too much. So these are the four things. So taken all together, again, this might be hard to read, but we basically have two scenarios for 2030. We have scenario one is the four core capabilities I mentioned it can already do, just gets better and better. Those four things being account analysis, budgeting, financial planning, plain English conversations, and then trading market research. Scenario two is there's actually a breakthrough here, and it can do things like buy, sell, hold advice, product recommendations, advanced tax strategies, and painful to undo products. So this is a simplification. There's obviously more to it than this, but for a high-level thought exercise, this is how you can break it out into how it might play out in the future. Which scenario will happen? If you ask 20 experts, you'll get 20 different answers. Some people will say there's no chance that'll happen. Gen AI is good enough. Some folks think that'll happen in 2 years. So I'm not here to tell you which scenario will happen. I just want to walk you through what could happen. So given this, how will this change the industry at both the people, employees level and at the firm level? So here we talk about those 2 scenarios. So scenario 1, AI cannot do those advanced capabilities. That's scenario 1. What does that mean? It means there's probably less customer service jobs, and financial advisors are forced to really move a little more upskilled, do more than just basic financial planning, and put someone in a model portfolio. If it's scenario 2, which is a huge if, but if it happens, and Gen AI can do advanced tax analysis and can tell you to buy, sell, hold, that is much more of an existential threat to a lot of people, right? That can actually try to replace a lot of financial advisors, accountants, specialists in insurance, et cetera. So I wanted to walk you through the actual capabilities, because hopefully that makes it less of a high-level disruption talk and more like, what are the specific capabilities, what does and doesn't exist, and how that would change the industry depending on how it plays out. Now, this next slide could be an entire presentation on its own. So this is a huge simplification. I'm not going to go through the technical situations that would happen behind it. But at the firm level, what might happen? So by firm level, I mean market share, who grows, who gets more profits, revenues, who loses revenue, who loses market share. At the firm level, there are basic 3 scenarios. One is tech wins, one is big banks win, and one is nobody wins, it's commoditized. So super simplified version. Imagine that one of the big tech firms or some new startup with a killer app comes out and they become the go-to personal assistant that everybody uses. That might disintermediate banks. So now there's someone in between the bank and the customer that gives them financial advice in an automated way, tells them to use that product or another one. That's one possible scenario. Second scenario is that tech companies don't have a meaningfully better AI, but because it's expensive and cumbersome to build an AI that can do buy, sell, hold advice, that can do tax strategies, it helps the big banks win. So the big banks are the only ones that can build advanced AIs, so they get another advantage over the smaller banks. The third scenario, again, we are simplifying like crazy here, is the technology becomes a commodity. All LLMs are roughly good enough quality. Any LLM you use is good enough. There really isn't a meaningful competitive advantage based on which LLM you use or how you set it up. So again, this could be a whole presentation, but it's how it might shape the industry. So final note here, just how you prepare for this. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and I think people tend to speak in absolutes. You know, this is what's going to happen, this one's going to win, open source is going to win. Nobody really knows. I'm not going to pretend like I know what the world's going to look like in 2030. All I can think about is the different scenarios. So you're a big bank, you're a brokerage firm. What do you do? So first, talk about the tech side and the people side. So on the tech side, the standard way a big bank approaches big tech builds doesn't really work. If you ever worked at a big company before, you know it's roughly along these lines. Group of people make a business case, spend like 3 months on that, then pitch the business case to the executive steer committee for $10 million, this amount of time, this fixed solution, and they go build it. That doesn't really work for AI. Instead, you should be focused on, here's our current understanding as of October 2024. We are probably going to get this wrong because things will change in 3 years. We can't anticipate right now. So instead, we're going to focus on taking the best practices. So I won't get into best practices in too much detail. I think a lot of you already know this, but basically a RAG database, call the API separately, build out an actual team in-house, not just rely totally on a third-party vendor, have an off-the-shelf plan if a different scenario plays out, so it's not a 6-month wait to do another business case. There's a lot of best practices you can use and approach it like an ongoing issue that's not just going to be solved with a business case at a point in time. So again, simplification, but the best way you can approach it. On the people side, does scenario 2 happen? I don't know. It's probably unlikely, but if it does, it massively disrupts your business. So the best thing you can do as of 2024 is try to sketch out what that looks like. What would it cost time-wise? What would it cost people-wise? How we change our business model if this actually happens and we need to spend 2 years transitioning our business. So this is very generic advice, but obviously we have 2 minutes here, so I wanted to keep it very high level. So with that, just a quick get in touch. Here's my name. You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you're based in Amsterdam, I host a monthly technical AI meetup. It's called AI on the Amstel Meetup. We have great speakers presenting on different technical AI topics. So if that interests you and you live here, come check it out. So with that, that's it for now. We'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much, Grant. Do we have any questions in the audience? Any questions?
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, all right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.